this is also why the Poles have been so adamant about making sure that the Ukrainians receive more equipment, more military aid. They know that this war will be decided not so much as in the old days by just the number of men, but it is really access to heavy equipment that is key. Those that have pro-Russian sympathies in the West, they keep talking about, well, Russia is 150 million people. They have a military tradition of sacrificing large numbers of men, using these human wave tactics, so to say. But they rarely admit to the fact that on paper Russia had more than 10,000 tanks when the war broke out. But they don't admit the fact that those tanks have been standing often not even in some garage, but out in the open on various fields in Siberia, and they had
rusting away.
They had 30 years of rain and hail and all types of the elements fighting against them, and they were nowhere near to be able to neither move or even being in a state in which they could be repaired. Easily, at least. So these large numbers, they were inflated simply, and a lot of the equipment that the Russians had, it turned out that it was equipment they couldn't simply field. With all these javelins and other modern weapons that the Ukrainian army received, much thanks to Great Britain, which sent a lot of javelins even before the war broke out in the weeks leading up to the outbreak of the war. The Russians lost enormous quantities of equipment in the initial weeks in the push for Kiev, and ever since they have been fielding older and older tanks. Initially it was the T-72s, now it's the T-64s, and even some T-55s might show up. So it is definitely it's not a great picture for the Russians, and many of them are starting to realize it as well. So those who say that the Ukrainians are fighting for nothing, the war is already settled, the outcome of the war is settled. The Poles realize as well that this is definitely not the case. The Poles, the Poles, they did beat the Red Army in 1920 in the Battle of Warsaw, despite Russia, or the Soviet Union at the time, being a country with a much larger population and a more numerous army. This is not this is not an argument that the Poles will listen to. They know that the Ukrainians, they certainly have actually very good chances of defending their own country
if the supplies of modern weaponry keep them, because one of the issues there is that the weaponry which has been supplied has left those supplying it rather short. And as the NATO Secretary General pointed out, I think 2 weeks ago, we need to rapidly increase production of ammunition, both to be able to continue to support Ukraine, but also to replenish our own stocks, which are dangerously weak now in some cases. I mean, I read something shocking by somebody saying that if at the same rate of fire which is being on in Ukraine, Great Britain would run out of ammunition in about 3 days. I mean,
yes,
astounding. But this, of course, is the so-called peace dividend after 1989, when the Warsaw Pact was essentially no longer a threat, which politicians all over Europe have sort of paid out and paid out and paid out and paid out. I mean, the German army is in a terrible mess. Our own army is far too small and hollowed out with equipment. So really, the West as a whole. And of course, then we have the intervention now of President Xi of China on his mischief-making visit to Moscow.
It is quite likely that Russia is receiving a lot of aid when it comes to especially artillery shells, even bulletproof vests, helmets, various types of body armor, which comes to Russia from various sources. There have been vessels making journeys across the Caspian Sea from Iran, with equipment apart from just the famous Shahed drones, the suicide drones that Russia has been using. When it comes to Chinese military aid, it is likely that it is going through North Korea, as the Chinese, they know that they have the world's eyes on them, and they don't want to send any direct flights going from Beijing to Moscow of military transports. Here, the North Koreans are quite a convenient way of sending military aid. There were recent reports about not sending finished artillery shells, but rather sending the explosives and various fuels and other components that are needed in the production of munitions in North Korea, which is then later on transported to Russia through the direct border that is between North Korea and parts of eastern Russia.
Adam, sorry, I'm going to have to, the clock in the corner of the room is doing its usual blinking at me, so I'm going to have to ask you to pause there, but fear not, we'll pick it up next time. There we are. I've had to interrupt Adam almost in mid-sentence, but fear not, if you join us next time, as we hope you will, we'll pick up the story here on Poland Daily History. In the meantime, thank you for watching.